Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Let's Eat. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to all the things. We are here today and we are off to the races. It is Monday morning and I'm feeling all of the Monday energy. I'm excited for this week. And let me just be honest and tell you, I have tried to record this episode probably 3 times in the last 24 hours. I tried to record a different topic yesterday, decided 15 minutes in, I don't like this topic. I don't like this episode. I don't want to talk about this anymore. And this is boring and no one's going to like this episode. So I just scratched that. Then I started recording another topic, and with Tally in my proximity, it was just too much. She was ultra needy yesterday, and I also was recording it in the middle of the day, and that just like threw me off too. I wasn't in the right headspace, and so here we are with no other choice but to record right now. But don't even worry, I am feeling ready to go here. I'm ready to rock. I just took a little bit of time to get to this point. But you know what? This is this is okay because this is something that I want to be sure I'm recording in a position that I feel my best and I'm able to talk most confidently about what we're exploring. And so if I'm only at like 50%, then that's no good. The episode won't turn out well. You won't enjoy the episode. So it all happens for a reason. So here we are recording this morning. Let's set the scene a little bit. Talo's at daycare. I have a coffee. I have some adrenal support with me. I am heading into my work day. I have lots on my to-do list today. So we are getting things going. When Tally's at daycare, I can operate a million miles a minute, and it feels really good to have the time to do that. So love my girl. And I know I've talked about this a zillion times, but it is nice to let her go to daycare and be at daycare so I can focus on work. And today we're talking about a topic that I'm really excited about and I felt really inspired and called to share on. I really love personal development. And I think as I stepped into this space of being a business owner, I never realized how relevant personal development is to the topic of entrepreneurship and business ownership, and how a lot of my beliefs and my frame of mind and how I approach business is going to be a big determinant of how successful my business is and how it grows, and kind of that self-work is necessary in order to grow as a business owner and to grow the business. So that is something I learned probably at the beginning of COVID. I really started to dive into personal development, and that's about the time that I started to think on building a business, and then I did that, and then here we are many years later. But this topic is really important to me because I think it has allowed me to grow and be successful, and I want to share with you all because maybe it will motivate you in some capacity. I do think some of this is partially just due to my personality, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but I just the topics that I cover on the podcast center around things that I'm passionate about in both health and in wellness. And this is probably more wellness based and more self-development and personal growth and whatnot focused. But that is such a big part of your health and your wellness is your own relationship with yourself and how you approach things you're passionate about and choices that you make and all that. So without rambling on any further, thank you so much for being here. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to the table and let's eat. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert, and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. So I am excited for this episode because I love to talk about this and I love to just inspire others. And I will say that I think part of my personality is just prone to this type of 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 behavior, or this type of what's the word I'm looking for? Impulsivity, maybe. But I'm just going to share with you a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and then how that plays into my personality, and then how it served me over the past several years. So, we're basically talking about doing things scared. And this has served me, especially in the past 5 years, in so many ways. And that's really what I want to share on in this episode, is to explore how it served me, and then also explain to you how it could be relevant in your journey, whether that's like a personal development journey, whether that's embarking on a new journey where you're building a business, or you're trying something new, or you're challenging yourself in a certain way, or as it relates to your health, and feeling ready or feeling motivated, or kind of the lies that we're told in those departments, that we should wait until we feel ready, or that we should only, we should be feeling motivated all the time, and so when I don't feel motivated, then I am off the hook and I don't have to do it, or I rely on that motivation, which we know motivation's fleeting, in order to get certain things done, or to go after the goals that I have for myself with my health, or in any capacity. And what I want to share on is how we've been led to believe that we should wait until we feel ready, in quotes. We should wait until we're motivated. And in reality, that's all just a lie. Like, that's all a lie. That's just not reliable. And it's because it's not consistent, and it's not going to remain linear, in the sense of we're not always going to feel ready. Ready is not a feeling, it's a choice. That is something I say in class too, which is kind of funny. I just started kind of adding that in. And be like, all right, whenever you're ready, whenever you feel ready, which is a lie, ready is not a feeling, it's a choice. And join me in this, heinous starting position of this sequence that we're going to do, and then stay in for far too long. But the point of this episode is to inspire you in that department, and to kind of break down that resistance, or break down that hesitation, or kind of look a little bit closely at the reasons why you're having trouble taking that next step. Maybe it's been a month, maybe it's been years, and to kind of give you some of my inspirational energy about the success that I've had, and hopefully it empowers you to do the same. So like I said, this can be relevant to health, but it can also be relevant to so many other things, and that's really what I want to talk about today. Now, a bit about me. I tend to operate in a more impulsive capacity. Okay. And what I mean by this, and impulsive, I feel like, is maybe not the right word. I will spend some time over this episode thinking about what the appropriate word would be here. But I operate from a very, once I have the idea, that's it. Once I have the idea, there's no going back from it. And usually, once I have the idea, I'm acting on it. Usually. I will be honest and say that that's not always the case, but usually. And this has been a very productive personality trait for me in a lot of ways. Because, like I said, once I have an idea, that idea that's there to stay. That idea is there, and it's not going anywhere. And it's funny because I'm going to give an example of this, but I talked to my mom about this in relation to a decision I was making, and she said she's the same exact way. She's like, I'm the same exact way. And it's so funny because I'm pretty sure my sister is not that way. My sister's very I'm I wouldn't consider myself type B, but I also feel she is way more type A, and I am more type B if we were comparing each other, but then I'm also type A. I'm like in the middle. I feel like I oscillate. But my sister's not like that. I don't believe she is. I think she's very big in planning and preparing, and I'm over here being like, yeah, no, I have this idea. I'm going to go do it, and that's just how it's going to be. And this goes for like purchases, okay? She's definitely not that way when it comes to purchases. Let me just say I am a little bit more impulsive in terms of spending than she is. Now she has 3 children now, so that obviously plays a different role in regards to what I am navigating obviously in my life right now, but anyways, my mom told me she's a very similar person in that way. And so I'm wondering, okay, maybe that's where I get it from. But I'm also just not one to sit and let something marinate because I feel like I make my mind up and then I just do it. And I think, yeah, maybe in some ways this has not served me, but I think in more ways it has served me. And that's kind of what I want to talk about is how can we stop putting the things that we want or that we're passionate about or our health on the back burner because we just don't quote unquote feel ready, or we don't quote unquote feel motivated, or we think we need to think on it a little bit more. And I'm not trying to encourage reckless decision making, okay? But I am trying to encourage action. And I think that is the difference here. And that's where I want to distinguish between, yeah, there are certain decisions that we need to think on and plan for and prepare for. But then at which point are we planning, preparing, and all of that to a point where that is impeding our ability to actually take action and to actually do something about it? And there's a difference. Okay, there's a difference there. And we might sit there all day long and say, no, I'm still planning, I'm still preparing, I'm just not ready. And that's actually just a way for us to resist the change that we need to make. That's just a way for us to delay action because we're scared, because it's new, because we don't know how to do it. And I think that in and of itself, that right there, that space of I'm not taking action because I still think I need to prepare or I'm not ready, that's where we need to call ourselves out. And that's where we need to say, wait a second, how long have I been feeling this way? How long have I been doing this? Am I really not ready or am I just afraid? Am I just too scared? Is it just that I don't know what's next or what's to come? And I think that is a very distinct difference. It's a very distinct difference. So let me take let's like take a trip down memory lane here and talk a little bit about different instances in my life that this has served me and I have noticed it as being pivotal in my growth, and also they stand out to me in like the scheme of my life. These are moments where this has really kind of, they've stuck with me as I just did it and figured it out and didn't let fear or not knowing or uncertainty or unfamiliarity didn't let that hold me back. And I'm going to tell you about how it's helped me grow. So, back when I was, oh boy, when I was 18, I was starting a new job at the bar that I now bartend at. And I had just started at the community college after transferring home from University of Delaware. And I was very happy with that decision. I was super excited to get back to work. I was super excited to be at home and commute to my classes. I was very pleased with this decision, which I feel like a lot of 18-year-olds would not feel this way, but I was like, no, I want to be at home. I want to commute to my classes. I want to have my car. I want to have a job. Like, I did not like college, being away at college. And it was the best decision that I could have made. But I started working at the bar that I now work. I've been there now for 13 years. And I applied as a server because I had been a server for many years and that was all I knew. And I never worked at a bar before. And about a couple weeks in, I was asked, do you want to train to bartend? And I did not want to do that, honestly. I was flattered that they wanted me to do that, but I did not want to do that. I did not want to bartend. I didn't know what I was doing. It was all new territory for me. I had just turned 19, and that just seemed very, very scary. And at the time, I didn't think I had a choice really because I felt like, well, I'm new here. They're asking me to do this. So who am I to say no to it? And I think it was a couple different, like I didn't not want to do it. I just didn't know how to do it. And it was like really intimidating, but I knew it was like an honor and a privilege to be asked to do it. So I just said, okay. And I went in and I trained with, knowing literally nothing. I downloaded like 3 or 4 different apps about drinks so I could quickly look up a drink if I didn't know what it was. Joke's on me because, you know, a lot of drinks have many different names and a lot of things don't actually, it's like the one drink and it's like different the same name, but it's got like three different recipes to it, or you know what I'm saying? It's like those apps didn't end up being very useful. I took like a $25 bartending course online just to get like the basics, but I truly did not know anything. I did not know one single thing. I didn't know the difference between red and white wine. I didn't know anything. I literally did not know anything at all. And now fast forward, I could bartend in the dark with my eyes closed and have no trouble in any way, in any shape or form. I know many drinks. I feel very confident in that position. But at that time, and I've shared this on the podcast before, and I know I'm kind of repetitive in it, but that's such a pivotal part of my life that I made the choice to do something scary. And let me just say, since that decision, my whole life is different. I have had many romantic relationships, not many, a few romantic relationships come out of working at this establishment. I have many of my best friends who have come out of working at this establishment. My whole life is different because I chose to take that step. And I spent now the entirety of my 20s and now moving into my 30s working here and developing relationships and growing my skill set. And I am who I am because of that choice. And I know it sounds dramatic, but it's true. It's so true because at 18, 19, I do think that my personality, you know, being being the person that I am, I think I was always going to be this way. But I think I attribute a lot of my customer service capabilities and my ability to connect with people to the fact that I started in this industry, in the service industry, when I was 14, and then moving through bartending through my 20s. I have encountered and I have worked with thousands of people, thousands of different personalities. I have had to talk to people and get to know them and have that kind of, active listener relationship with people. And I feel like that has made me a stronger person in my work now because of that. Because I'm able to strike a conversation with anyone, to have conversations just, with difficult people, with stubborn people, with, just all sorts of different people. And I do believe that a large part of who I am at this very moment is due to the fact that I've spent so many years in this space. And so my ability to connect with people is so strong. And that that's huge. This role has provided me with countless opportunities. It has put me through undergrad and grad school. I have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree, all because I worked through my schooling. So you think about all the things that have come to fruition as a result of saying yes to this thing that was scary to me. And I think that's pretty cool because I didn't know anything. And guess what? I wasn't ready. I didn't know what I was doing. It was uncharted territory, but I still did it and I did it anyways. And look what has grown from it. Look what has grown from it. So that is the most prominent example as far as back as I can remember. That and then obviously as I've moved through my 20s, I've become a lot more, I don't want to say reckless because that's not the right word. I don't want to say impulsive because that's not the right word. But I think I've seen what this can do and I've let that be then my guide. It's like once you do it, you're like, wow, look how good that turned out. That was actually really like that actually worked out really well. Let me try that again. I'm like kind of contemplating this decision, but it always works out. Like every time I've done this, it's worked out. So what's who's to say that this won't too work out? You know what I mean? The more you gather evidence to support that it will always work out, the more easily you can then make the choice that you need to make, but maybe you feel a little scared about, maybe you feel like a little intimidated by, but you have trust in the fact that will work out because spoiler alert, it always works out. It always works out the way that it's meant to. And so the more that you get that evidence and that momentum underneath your belt around, well, it's always worked out in the past, so it's going to work out now. That gives you a little bit more ground to stand on and then to make that choice again. So, fast forward to probably, how old was I? 26, maybe? 26 or 27. I started working for the private practice that I was hired to work at immediately after graduation. I found it on Indeed, the job listing, and it was like a week after graduation. I had planned to just bartend all summer and then find a job in the fall. And I think part of that was due to I was I was nervous and I was resistant to getting into the field, especially because I think subconsciously I knew I wasn't super aligned with that work. And so I think it was like avoidance and trying to maybe say, oh, I'll just bartend for the summer. This is what I know, and then then I'll find a job, and I just was not motivated to find a job. And I think I also knew too, what I ultimately wanted to do was more nutrition for mental health and like more of a holistic approach to mental health. And I just knew as a recent grad, I was going to have to work in an agency or in a practice that was more just traditional mental health in order to get my feet wet. And that I also did not want to do. Like I didn't want to grow up. I didn't want to do the work that I was now licensed to do. And, that was just always the difference between me and my classmates. My classmates were just so eager to get into the field, and I just didn't feel that same eagerness. And obviously, in retrospect, I know why, because now I'm doing something that's not that, and I am eager. I'm like so excited for this. So just interesting. But anyways, I applied, I interviewed, and I got the job in a matter of like a week. It was just a quick and easy, process. I got along with the woman who owned the practice. She was, we're closer. She's in her early 30s, I believe, and we aligned in a lot of ways. So it was exciting. So I started in early July of that year, and I, at the same time, started my LLC. I created my LLC that fall. And the goal was never to really pursue my business full throttle. The goal was to establish the business so that in a few years I would then be fully licensed in the state of New Jersey as a therapist. So at the time I was an LAC, which is a licensed associate counselor, and under supervision I am required to complete, I think it was like 4,500 hours of training of client facing work under supervision to then become a licensed professional counselor, which is an LPC. And so the goal was to establish my LLC, have an established foundation of my business. And then from there, in a few years, once I had my supervised hours and became an LPC, I would then be able to merge my licensure with the LLC and have an established private practice on my own. Now, of course, this was all tentative. Of course, the woman who hired me didn't know that I had this kind of tentative plan. And at the end of the day, I really didn't know if that was going to end up being the case. If I was super happy with where I was going to stay there. But, that was kind of the plan, the plan. That was the plan. So then fast forward into probably about 6 months, 8 months into working at this particular practice, and I realized a lot of different things. I realized I'm burnt out. I realized I make more money as a bartender than I do as a therapist. I realized the work I was doing wasn't super fulfilling. I realized there was a lot of resistance around lifestyle for mental health in this particular practice. And, I was seeing clients of all capacities. I was seeing all demographics, all racial backgrounds, all ages, all genders. I was seeing all sorts of different individuals, which was great, right? It gave me a ton of experience. But what I think I realized was, what? These clients are not interested in making lifestyle changes, which don't get me wrong, there's obviously a lot of disconnect between how our physical health impacts our mental health. So I can't expect these people to be like, oh, yeah, like I want to change my diet. I want to change these things because I know it's going to impact my, symptoms of depression or my symptoms of anxiety. But that was where I had a hard time because I could see what clients were eating and living their lives and how they were operating. And I knew that those things would better them and help them feel better. But I could not force them to do these things, So it was a lot of just cognitive behavioral work, which don't get me wrong, to this day, I still do a lot of similar work in my own work, not as a therapist, but a lot of these themes are concurrent with what I do in terms of how our thoughts influence our reality and how our thoughts impact our actions and how we can change our thoughts and all that. So I felt very conflicted because I was working as a bartender and I wanted to honestly bartend. I was making more money doing that. I remember thinking I'm so jealous of this one girl who's a good friend of mine because she wasn't doing anything. She was just bartending and she had like all this freedom and flexibility and she was working full time at the bar. And I remember feeling like almost envious of her because I wanted that, which like is so insane when you think about it because I am employed at what you would consider my dream role and I'm just so unhappy. And at that point too, my business started to kind of take flight. I would say. I mean, I ended up putting out a Google ad that summer. So I had been at this job for a year now and I put out a Google ad and I started getting inquiries and one of the clients that actually I signed that summer, she ended up being a client of mine for like 3 years and she became a very close client of mine. And so at that point, I started to juggle a lot. I started to juggle the stress of bartending and wanting to bartend more because I was making more money at the time. I was still living at home. I didn't have any major bills. So it wasn't like that was necessarily a consideration. But my caseload was growing. I was taking on more clients as both a coach and as a therapist. And I just knew it wasn't sustainable. I knew I couldn't do it all. And don't get me wrong, that time in my life, that was actually, you know, I liked it at the same time because I was busy, I was doing a lot, I was working a lot. I just remember at that point in time it was exciting because my business was just getting started, but I knew that it wasn't sustainable. So I remember it was early September of 2022 and I said to my mom, I said, "I can't do this." I remember sitting outside of my dad's house and just thinking to her and telling her, "I can't possibly do all of this. I can't do all of these things. I make more money as a bartender. I don't make a lot of money as a therapist, which is outrageous just from a systemic standpoint. Mental health is like one of the most important things in the whole world, and yet mental health providers are like so underpaid. And I understand I was fresh out of grad school, so I myself am not necessarily referring to me, but I'm just as a whole, all mental health providers in general are underpaid. But anyways, and my business started to pick up and I also was like, you know what? My business is my focus. I didn't know where it was going, but I knew I need to put my best foot forward here because these are my first and foremost clients that are going to determine a lot of what happens next. I wanted to be sure I could give them 110% because I knew that the first few years of business are pivotal and if I'm only giving them 50% because that's all I can give, that is going to reflect in my success with them. And then that is going to kind of flesh out the name for the business when it's really just getting started. So, after many minutes of me going on and on about this dilemma, my mom basically said, "So, it sounds like you need to quit." And I said, "Oh, yeah." Like I knew that that was where my heart was, and I knew that where it was headed, and I just didn't think she would support that, and she suggested it. So let's just say I took that idea and I ran with it, and I made an appointment, made a scheduled a call, we'll call it, with my supervisor, the owner of the practice, someone I had a really good relationship with. And I basically just said, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't feel like my heart's here. I'm not feeling fulfilled. And this is where I'm at." Now, in retrospect, and even at that moment in time, I felt like that was exactly what I needed to do. I do not regret that at all. I have never once looked back, but I'll put it vaguely. She more or less made me feel like I was not making the right choice. And she really tried to talk me out of it. She tried to claim that I wasn't in the right headspace. I had been going through something with my boyfriend and she knew about it. And she tried to paint it as that being of influence. She tried to pivot and give me an alternative role that was a more nutritionally focused role so that I could still work there. And it was just, I was kind of made to feel like, I don't know, I felt I knew this is what I wanted. And this is kind of going back to the original point of this episode was I had the idea and I knew that's what I wanted. I felt relief thinking about resigning. I felt relief thinking about not working there anymore. And that was enough for me. And I trusted that I would figure it out. I trusted that I would work it out because I knew I could bartend and make 3 times the amount of money I'm making here. So I have a job. Like I'm not quitting and going into unemployment. I am quitting and going into a business that's blooming, and I am also going into back into a role that I know that I'm comfortable with and I'm totally capable of working and surviving. Yes, obviously, like I said before, I didn't have major bills like I do now where I'm paying rent and I'm paying utilities and all these things, but I knew that that was the decision, and she was trying to maybe convince me that it wasn't, and I don't know. I'm not going to say much on that. That just put a bad taste in my mouth about things, but regardless, I made that choice. I don't really remember what the process was thereafter. I think we met a few other times to talk about logistics of things. In my contract, I was required to fulfill another 8 weeks of basically client transition. So I spent the next 8 weeks just funneling my clients either to a new therapist or referring them out. I had to have hard conversations with all of my clients. Some of them were like, okay, no problem. Others were like really upset and very emotional, which I was not expecting. I also at the time didn't even realize that I had signed that part of I didn't realize in the contract that I was required. I forgot what it was called, but it was like 8 weeks of just like a transitional period. So at the end of the 8 weeks, it was the day before Thanksgiving. I met with the team one last time and I said my goodbyes, and that was it. And I told myself, okay, in 6 months, if this does not work out, if in 6 months you still are in a place where, things aren't amounting in the way that you had thought they would, or you're not making the progress that you had wanted, or whatever the case is, then you go back. I don't know if I was thinking I'd go back to her. I thought that, which I don't know. I don't think I wanted to, but I'll figure it out. I'll get another job. And at that point, that was November 2022, and I said, in 6 months, and this was honestly advice that I got from everyone else, and it kind of excited me. It was like, okay, cool. Like 6 months, put my head down. I have all this time now. I can like really focus on my business. Now, in those 6 months, I didn't necessarily grow my business the way I had envisioned. But in those 6 months, it just continued to reaffirm like I am not meant to be in the mental health field, and I am just going to keep going in this direction. And I will be honest and say, since November of 2022, so coming on 3.5 years, I just didn't give myself the option. Like I didn't give myself the option. I said, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life, and I'm going to figure it out. And I don't have a choice. There's no option here. There's no option for me to do anything else. And I think that type of mentality is, I think, to kind of broaden this conversation a bit more so that it becomes a little bit more applicable in a multitude of different ways. If you just don't give yourself the choice, then you don't have the choice, right? And that goes for so many things. And I think as it relates to health, it's like, if I don't give myself the choice to, like, if my only option is to invest in my health because I know how important it is, then I don't have any other choices. I don't have the choice to not go move my body. I don't have the choice to take the shortcuts. I don't have that choice. I have no choice. And I think that's where we have to hold ourselves accountable. And that's where tough love is required. And that's where we have to be more kind of self-disciplined a little bit to say like, no, but like I don't have the choice here to do anything else but take care of myself because that is what's important. And I mean, it sounds easier said than done, right? I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, just go do this and that's it. Like you just figure like that's it. You just don't give yourself a choice and then that's it. Like there's no, okay, yeah, no big deal. Like, yeah, this is so easy. I'm just going to like, obviously you're human. You're going to find excuses. You're going to find ways to, to will yourself out of it. But I think the weight of importance of our health, there really is nothing more important. And I think that's why it is so important that we don't give ourselves the choice of an alternative, because the alternative is losing our health. And I don't want to be so dramatic in saying that, like, okay, it's either you have your health or you don't, right? But I guess it kind of is that way, because we're not reminded how valuable our health is until we don't have it anymore. And I think that is what is the problem is number one, we are indoctrinated by a culture that doesn't emphasize the importance of health, because healthcare is a business. Without getting too controversial here, healthcare is a business. Okay, so why would our culture and why would our country want us to be healthy? Why would they want that, guys? Why would they want that? They don't want that. They want us to be sick. They want us to be reliant on the system, and that's just the way it is. Okay, you might call me a conspiracy theorist, but listen, that is the way it is. So when we think about it, it is up to us. It is literally up to us to make it the only option, is to say, I am going to spend my days in the midst of all the responsibilities, the minutia of our day to day, right? That we know and we know well. But in the midst of that, my health is going to be on the forefront. In the midst of that, I'm going to ask myself, what would my healthiest self do? Because that is the only choice that I have. And that's kind of what I thought, right? When it came to this particular phase in my life was, if I don't have a choice, like if this is the option, this is plan A and there's no plan B, because I certainly was not going to be bartending for the rest of my life and to live on that. That was not happening, right? If And I wasn't also going to use my master's degree. I wasn't going to go back to working in that capacity, because that was not what served me. Then this is my only choice. And at the time, it wasn't that scary. I mean, maybe now it would be a little scary. Obviously, my business is in a tremendously different spot, but it was just that decision of, this is my only choice, that got me to where I am now, 3.5 years later. Because listen, it has been a journey, and that is something I have to remind myself of. It is the choice that I made in 2022 to not give myself the choice that has allowed me to get to the point where I am now, where I am very happy in my work, where I live, what I'm doing, my day to day. I get to do the most fulfilling work ever. I make my own schedule, and not because it was given to me. And I have to remind myself of that too. Like, sometimes when I'm on my deck between calls, or I'm with Tally, we're out walking in the middle of the day, I realize, I'm like, this is such a blessing. I'm so lucky to have this. And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not lucky. I'm not lucky. I worked freaking hard for this. Okay? I'm proud of this. And that's something I'm actually reading in this book, that I'm this part of this episode is inspired by the book. But basically, this woman, she is biracial, and she came from a very low income childhood, and she's now worth billions of dollars. And she talks about how, she's proud of what she's created, and it's not luck that got her there. It's hard work that's got her there. And I align with that. And I'm not out here trying to, like, pat myself in the back and be like, "Oh my god, I'm the best." But I do deserve to acknowledge that in myself, because I've spent a lot of time working on creating this. And it's because of that choice that I made in 2022 to not give myself the option. And it's the same thing with healing. If you do not give yourself the option of not healing when it comes to health, and you decide every day there is no other option, results are inevitable. Someone actually just said this, and I'm actually just thinking about it now, and I loved it. She basically said, like, when you are consistent and you show up, results are inevitable. Now, the timeline by which those results arrive, that is flexible. Okay. That might not be tomorrow. That might be the next day. But when you decide your health is the only option, when you say, I am going to heal, whatever that looks like, and you commit to that goal every single day, and you don't give yourself the option of anything else, you will be successful. And you just have to keep going. And that is really the overlap of what I'm trying to express here as it relates to my choice in my business, and then also as it relates to health, is like, both of those, it's the same energy of, I did not give myself the choice of anything else, and here we are. So since making that choice, that has been the energy behind my work, is since 2022, maybe 2023, we have just taken that to the next level of, I don't know what I'm doing, and I might not feel ready for this, but I'm just going to do it. And that has to do with just like micro decisions on business. That has to do with things I've said yes to, as far as like speaking engagements or podcasting or certifications, or, I think about becoming certified in Pilates. Same thing. I had no experience, and boy, has that changed my life in just a year. The relationships I've built, the way it's impacted my business, the joy that it's brought me. I just said yes. I said I don't know what I'm doing, and this is scary, and this is really intimidating, and I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I did it, and here we are over a year later, and it's become one of my favorite things, most favorite things in the whole world. So I just think about the way that has been the driving force in my business by just saying yes, even if I don't feel qualified, even if I don't feel ready, even if I don't feel like I know what's to come or I'm scared of it. It's doing things scared and doing things because you know that there's value in it on the other side, and not letting that uncertainty or that overthinking or that, oh, maybe not today, or whatever the case is, not letting that be the reason you don't do it. And I think that that is going to help you so much in whether it's your personal life, whether it's your work, whether it's your health. And that's really what has created the success that I have. I'm not trying to say I'm like this ultra, ultra, ultra successful person. Like, I'm certainly not where I want to be yet in terms of like business and growth and all that. But I'm certainly much farther along than where I was 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And, even this podcast, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I tell you guys all the time, I didn't even know how to do the audio until 6 months after I published my first episode. So just like the growth in that alone and learning how to do that. And yet this has become one of my favorite things in the whole world, right? Podcasting. And so I really do want to shed light on the fact that there is so much value into stepping into things that are uncomfortable, that are out of a comfort zone in both business and in health and in life. And the most growth comes from stepping out of what's familiar. And I think that is something that, once you build a tolerance to it, like once you just start doing it, it almost becomes just your norm. And I think that that's something I want to highlight, because that I think is what will help ease the transition, I guess, for you, is once you start to do it, you start to realize, wait a second, this is kind of genius. Like, wait a second, I'm beyond to something here. And I'm going to be honest with you, that is basically what I've just said before, right? Where like once you do it once and then you start doing it again and you see that there's growth in it, you just decide, well, I guess I need to just keep doing this because this is genius. This is actually really useful and really, effective, and it's really going to get me places. And so when it comes to your health, it's the same thing. Once you do it once, then you can do it again and again and again, and you realize you're making progress, you're making change. And it's like, I haven't worked out in 5 years. The first time, yeah, that's going to feel uncomfortable and scary, and I'm not going to want to do it. I'm not going to feel motivated. I'm not going to feel ready. I'm going to push it off. And then you do it, and you're like, okay, one under my belt. And then the next day, you do it again. And then the next day, you do it again. And guess what? After you do it a couple times, a couple weeks, a couple months, it becomes more of who you are. And then guess what? After a few years, a few decades, it's just your identity. You're just an active person, and you just do it, and you just don't ask questions about it, right? And it's just who you are. So I'm taking this in many different ways, okay? As I veer off more into the business self-development world, I try to veer myself back into the health and wellness world, because I feel like that is what I'm trying, that's like what the podcast is about. But I don't want to discredit this concept in all of its forms, how it can be useful in so many different ways, and also how it's brought so much value to me. So I hope that this episode inspires you. I am not quite done with it, but just up until this point, I know it's just a lot of me kind of talking about my history and what my journeys look like and whatnot. But at the end of the day, these are the pivotal moments that have allowed me to step into where I am now. And so, like I said, as much as this feels more relevant from like a business and like pursuing what you're passionate about angle, which, listen, I'm all about talking about that. That's obviously like something I'm very passionate about. But this can also apply to health. And anything that you're procrastinating, anything that you're putting off, we have to realize that it's not about feeling motivated all the time. It's not about feeling ready. Once again, ready is not a feeling, it's a choice. It's really about deciding, this is what I want. I want to heal. I want to feel better. I want better health. So I have to stop allowing myself procrastination and allowing myself that resistance to doing the things I need to do in order to get to where I want to be, and just do them. And that was my thing, was I have to do the scary things. Like, for example, signing up for the functional lab program. I did that the week of my birthday in 2024. Yeah, 2024. So beginning of December 2024, there was a sale on the program, and I said, "You know what? I'm hitting brick walls with clients, and I keep referring clients out to get this testing done, and why would I do that? Why don't I just do it myself?" So I said, "All right, I'm pulling the trigger. I'm doing it." And so I did it. And it was the best thing I ever could have done. The best thing I ever could have done. And so when you look at it through that lens, when you start to realize, like, I could sit here and oscillate and think about it and reflect on it and, wait till I feel ready, wait till a couple weeks from now. I can't tell you how many people I talk to where they're like, "Well, right now is not a good time, so I'm going to wait a couple months." And when it's a financial concern, absolutely I understand, right? No disrespect to that. I completely understand. But when it's just like, "Oh, this doesn't feel like the right time," it doesn't. Listen, your health does not wait. Your health needs attention right now. It needs attention right now. It needs attention yesterday. It needs attention. So that that is, in some capacities, I personally think this might be a sore spot. This might rub you the wrong way. But I think some of that is just resistance to making changes. It's resistance to knowing that you're stepping into discomfort, that you have to push yourself into something that is new, that is scary, that is uncharted for you in order to create different results. And that is the lesson that is being emphasized in this episode, that you know, we have to sometimes get things moving, because no one else is going to do that for us. And in order to make a change in our lives, in order to improve our health, in order to take the next step, in order to stop treading water in a comfort zone that's just not serving us, we have to decide that now is the time. And like I said, I do attribute some of this decision making to just the nature of my personality and being someone who's like, "Yeah, I'm just going to do it and I'll figure it out." But I said this the other day on Instagram, like, I trust myself enough to figure it out. And that, I think, is huge. You have to trust yourself. Everything is figure outable, right? Everything is figure outable. And I am so proud of myself to figure it out. That's the thing. I'm so proud of myself and the person that I am to know, you know what? I might have no freaking idea what I'm doing. And let me just say, that was the case with business. That was the case with all of this. I don't know how to podcast. I didn't know how to teach a Pilates class. I didn't know how to do any of that. But I have showed myself, look at you. You can figure it out. You figured it out this time. You figured it out that time. You'll figure it out again. And that is the amount of self-trust that you need to have in yourself, no matter what your decision looks like. So I I'm feeling all the things. I hope that this was inspiring for you in whatever place you are right now when it comes to your health, whether that's, taking the dive into getting testing done, whether that's with me or with someone else, or taking that next step in addressing a concern that you've been procrastinating or you've been pushing off, or you have just kind of resisted. Taking the next step in a business decision, or in something that you've always wanted to do, or a place you always wanted to go, or like whatever the case is, like all of these things that we tend to put off because it's just not the right time, or it's unknown, or whatever the case is. It's like life is so short. And I know that this goes down a whole different rabbit hole of like, life is short, live your life, all that. But actually though, I'm so proud of the person that I've become as a result of the choices that I've made in that department, because I allowed myself to do scary things for the betterment of my life, my business, and my growth as an individual. And I think that that is something that's so cool, that like, had I not said yes, or had I not put myself in a position to take risks, then I wouldn't be where I am and I wouldn't have the business that I have and the podcast and being a Pilates instructor and have all of these great things happening. And I just attribute all of that to my self-trust and my getting out of my own way. And it's not something I've said once in this episode. Get out of your own way. That is ultimately a lot of what this is too. Is you are getting in your own way of better health, you're getting in your own way of better success, you're getting in your own way in so many ways. There's no one standing in your way. And that I think is so big. It's like we think, oh, well, this, that, the other thing. You are making up all these excuses and resisting that change so hard. You're convincing yourself that it's not possible, that it's too scary, it's too new, I don't know what I'm doing, yada, yada, whatever the case is. And that's just you making reasons as to why you cannot do it. It's sabotaging your success before you even get started. And I think that is where you have to kind of call yourself out and be like, you know what? I am getting in my own way here because it's new, it's scary, it's something I don't know. But on the other side of it can be so much growth and excitement and change for the better. And that's exciting. That is so exciting. So this episode is an inspirational ode to you. Okay? These are my words of wisdom to you as I kind of highlight my journey and the moments in the journey that have brought the biggest change, or I look at as being those kind of pivotal moments that like really, really, really changed the game for me. And 2026, there is no different energy that I'm bringing into this year than exactly what I've just shared. I'm even going beyond that in putting myself out there, in trying new things and going after what I want, both in terms of my health, but also in terms of business, because I've seen such incredible return on that way of operating that I would be foolish not to do that. And that's like a big part of what my focus is for this year. Like I said, is just especially when it comes to my business and where I want to be and how I want it to sustain me, because that's my primary goal right now is, getting it to a point where it is sustaining me and my livelihood, which I'm in a much different place than where I was 6 months ago, where I was a year ago. So thank goodness for that. But just being able to do things that scare me, that put myself out there in ways that are new and different and just say yes. Just say yes and worry about it afterwards. Just say yes. Just say yes and worry about it afterwards, okay? That is going to be my reckless, reckless, impulsive, the personality trait coming out to to influence you to do all these things that you want to do, because why not? Literally, why not? Okay? And let me just say, I'm going to release this episode and I'm going to remember all these things that I'm saying to you, and I'm just going to think about all the listeners. You know how sometimes I just forget that I have listeners and that you guys listen to these episodes and that you're actually listening to me say these things. If I'm in the comfort of my dining room right now, my home, and I'm just by myself and just like, on this inspirational tirade of go quit your job, go chase your dreams, all and and then I'm gonna be like, "Oh, listen to today's podcast episode," and forget, and you guys are gonna be like, "Oh my god, Emily is certifiably insane," and I am, and I'm fine with that. And it's so funny because one of my best friends, I think I've talked about this before. She and I have been best friends for over a decade now, so we've been long, long, long time. And as I've stepped more into this space of making kind of these choices and going after things that I want and whatnot, I've also just gently, maybe sometimes aggressively, nudged her to do the same because of her particular situation and what she wants and what she doesn't want. And she's just so not that person. She's so not that impulsive. Like, let me just quit. And so it's been years that I've just said to her, I've just like tried to hype her up and be like, just quit. You'll figure it out. It's no big deal. And she's like, Emily, no, I can't do that. I'm like, no, it worked for me. It's going to work for you. But for real, I understand that there has to be some caution and some logic. And I understand that. And maybe some rationality, if you will. But you know what? Life is short. Who needs rationale? Who needs caution? Just go for it. All right? That's going to be my send off for you. But in reality, this is This is something I'm super passionate about, and I love as a business owner that I can have an idea and I can just go after it, and that's a lot of what I'm focused on, especially right now. I have a couple ideas and I'm like, "Oh, I love that idea. I'm gonna try to expand on that," or "I love that. Like, where could that go?" And that's like so cool to me that I can do that because it's my business and I can decide where it goes, and that's essentially the foundation of it is going after things and not questioning it too much and not putting too much thought into it, but just saying, you know what, I'm going to figure it out because I trust myself enough to do that. And that's really where I believe my greatest success will always come from is the trust of, I like this idea. I feel inspired to act on this idea. And so where I'm taking it next, I'll figure it out. I'm just taking the steps that are in front of me and not worrying about what is 5 steps ahead. I'm just gonna figure it out as it comes. And you know what? It's worked for me so far, and it has been great. So, here's to that. Here's to you doing the same, whether that's in your business or in your life or in your health. Go after Go after the status of health that you want. Go after the goals, the things that you have that you dream of that you want because it's totally plausible, it's totally doable, and you just have to be willing to do it and be afraid while doing it. And guess what? Two opposites can exist at the same time. You can be afraid of something and you can still go after it. That, my friend, is probably the best way I could leave you here. You can be afraid of something, you can be intimidated by something, you can feel uncomfortable by something, especially as it relates to your health, and you can do it anyway. That is where we call, in that dialectical behavior therapy about two opposites existing at the same time. Because sometimes people think, oh, well, I'm scared, so I shouldn't do it. I'm scared, so I can't do it. No, you can be scared, you can be uncomfortable, you cannot know what's next, you cannot know, how to go about it, but you can do it anyways. You can. And pardon me, I retract that, but an insert and you can be afraid and you can do it anyways. Okay, so thank you for being here. What an episode this has been. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you've made it this far in the podcast episode. We're creeping up to an hour here, and I certainly could go on much longer, but I will spare you that. I will spare you that, and I hope that you feel inspired after listening and take this and apply this in whatever way it can be applied in your life because I'm certain that it can be applied. It's just every person's different, and so it's going to look differently in everyone's life, but I support you. I'm cheerleading for you. I'm cheering you on from afar. If you have questions or feedback about today's episode, I am always happy to hear. Please let me know. Email me, DM me, whatever the case is, however you can get a hold of me. And until next time, be well.